A great choice for exhilarating entertainment.
Bowman the Showman has won at Las Vegas in overtime.
Las Vegas Motor Speedway treats locals right. Free parking all the time. What happens in Vegas, the locals attend.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Shapiro from Pushing the Limits. I want to tell you guys about Sahara West Urgent Care and Wellness. They're conveniently located on the southwest corner of Sahara and Jones. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Sahara West Urgent Care, they'll take care of all your healthcare needs. They offer routine services such as physicals, STD testing, car accident treatment, and work injuries. You name it, they do it. They have on-site x-ray, EKG, ultrasound, and labs. They treat chronic conditions such as asthma, blood pressure, diabetes, and more. They also offer general wellness exams, treatments such as testosterone enhancement and cancer screening. They're located on Sahara, 6125 West Sahara Avenue. Their number is 702-248-0554. And the best part, they accept most major insurances and affordable cash pay prices, office visits starting at just $95. And I'm also a client, so please give them a call, 702-248-0554.
It's time for the most interactive radio program in Las Vegas today. It's time for Pushing the Limits with Brian Shapiro. Brian will talk sports, politics, entertainment, and anything that matters to you. Feel free to call Brian at 702-221-7283.
You want answers? I want the truth!
Now, Pushing the Limits, here's Brian Shapiro.
Yeah, how's everybody going? It's not Brian Shapiro, it's Thomas Moskal in studio today again. Brian's still out, right? Yeah, Brian's still out. He should be back in next week. You know, our wishes go out to him. But we're going to go ahead and get started here today. And what we're going to talk about today is Tyre Nichols. No, we need it up. Yeah, we're going to talk today about Tyre Nichols. And Tyre Nichols was a man who was beat to death by 5 Memphis police officers back on January 7th. And they released a body cam last Friday night. They don't always release this stuff out, but the Memphis police did release the body cam. And there's just been a lot of talk. I mean, it's kind of gripped the country here. So here's the situation. I waited. I reserved judgment. I'm a former prosecutor. I reserved judgment on it until they released the body cam. Memphis police chief did say they were going to release it. And they released it. And so if you want to go see it, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty brutal to watch. But if you go to the Memphis Police website, if you Google Memphis Police body cam, Tyre Nichols, any combination of that, it's going to direct you to the Memphis Police website. And they are going to direct you to a link to Vimeo. And there's going to be 4 videos available, and you can watch them. 3 videos are officer body cam, and 1 video is actually surveillance. It was a camera that was across the street from the actual beating of Tyre Nichols that caught everything on tape. And probably if not for that video, if you've given it a watch, if not for that video, we wouldn't really have the full story of what happened here. So thankfully there was a video there. And let me tell you, it was a brutal watch. It was really tough to watch. But I gave it a run through. First watch, I kind of started out in the order that they put the videos up there. And so here's the breakdown of the situation with Tyre Nichols. All right, Tyre Nichols is a 29-year-old black man in Memphis. Police body cam starts out with an officer approaching what seems to be a traffic stop that's being pretty aggressive. So this is not the body camera of the first officer on the scene or the first officer that tried to pull him over. But this officer gets out of his car, and it depicts another officer already approaching Tyre Nichols' driver's side door, basically being super aggressive vocally, and rips the door open, telling him to get the F out of the car, get the F out of the car, pulls him out of the car, just yanks this young man out of the car. And immediately Tyre Nichols, he's telling him Tyre Nichols to get on the ground. And Tyre Nichols is not being aggressive. You know, he's being compliant. He seems like a person who did not realize why he was being dragged out of the car the way that he was. And I'll do my best impression. Here's the tone of the officer. Get them out of the car. Get them out of the car. Would you want to get shot? You want to get shot? Rips him out of the car. And here's my impression of Tyre Nichols. All right. Tyre Nichols then goes to the ground pretty soon thereafter. There's now multiple officers on top of him. And he's on the ground. And they have, I'll just depict the situation for you. These officers, these aren't little guys. These are all big boys. Okay, I'll tell you that. Tyre Nichols, pretty skinny guy, not nearly as big as any of these officers. They got one officer holding. Tyre Nichols is on the ground. Okay, he's laying on his side. One officer is holding one of his arms. Another officer is holding his left arm. Then there's another officer down on his legs, and this is. Traditionally, how officers will restrain somebody is each officer takes a limb. Just think about it. I mean, that's common sense, right? So they basically have him incapacitated at this point, but they are still being aggressive. And they are saying, one officer whose body cam is activated has a taser right to the quadricep thigh of Tyre Nichols. And he's like, I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you. Tyre Nichols is on the ground. Another officer is trying to put his arm behind his back. His arm is basically at his side right there behind his back. And he's saying, man, if you don't put your arm behind your back, I'm going to break it. I'm going to break your arm. Another officer, another officer says, if you don't lay down, man, if you don't lay down. Now, all this is happening at the same time. Tyre Nichols looks up and right into the officer wearing the body cam. He goes, I'm already on the ground, bro. I'm already on the ground, bro. And he was already laying down. Well, one of the officers says at that point, they go, spray him. You know what that means? Pepper spray. So an officer whips out the pepper spray. They spray Tyre Nichols right in the face. At this point in the interaction, and let me reiterate, let me say something to describe the situation a little bit more. Before Tyre Nichols says, I'm already on the ground, but Tyre Nichols, while they're being aggressive and manhandling him, roughing him up on the ground, he says, look, I'm just trying to go home. And this is how he says it. I'm going to mimic the tone of his voice. You guys are doing a lot right now. I'm just trying to go home. That's while they're screaming at him at the top of their lungs, threatening him. That's the tone of his voice. So they pepper spray him. At this point, the body cam gets a little shaky. You can't really tell what happens, but within a split second, Tyre Nichols is now on his feet and he is running away from these cops. He runs around the car. And the cop who's wearing the body cam tries to tase him, shoots the taser, misses him, and Tyre Nichols is, hauling butt down the street at this point. Officers go in pursuit. They're all winded, the ones that we see on body cam, and they're winded probably because of how much physical exertion they were just putting on Tyre Nichols at that initial traffic stop. This body cam is interesting because as it continues on, the officer wearing the body cam does not go in foot pursuit. And him and one other officer stay at the scene with the vehicles. The other officer that's staying in the scene was obviously got pepper sprayed himself in the eyes because he's over there pouring water on his eyes. The officer wearing the body cam says, yes, I got pepper sprayed, but it just hit my eyebrows. And for those of you who have never been pepper sprayed before, it doesn't have to get in your eyes. It's pretty irritating on the skin itself. So those two officers are at the scene, but they're maintaining radio contact. And the officer wearing the body cam says, Marvin and them are chasing him down the street. And then he says, I hope they stomp his ass. And the officer who is trying to wash the pepper spray out of his eyes, he says something inaudible, but it's kind of like, what did you say? And the officer repeats, he goes, I hope they stomp his ass. Well, anybody who knows the story, Tyre Nichols ended up dying from being beat to death. Just a few minutes later down the street when the officers did get a hold of him. They finally do catch him over the radio, and this is on the body cam. And the officer wearing the body cam stays with the vehicle, and the other officer who's getting the pepper spray jumps in his car, and he drives to the scene. Ultimately, he is one of the officers charged for second-degree murder in this case, among other charges. So that's the end of that body cam. But you know why that body cam is very interesting? It's very interesting because that paints the initial interaction with Tyre Nichols. And what we see is Tyre Nichols is stopped at a red light and he is yanked out of his car. He's dragged out of his car, and the officers are being super aggressive with a man who seems to be super compliant and calm. And ultimately, when they pepper spray him, this is just a lack of awareness on these officers' part. I mean, how much of an idiot do you have to be to pepper spray a suspect while you got 3 officers holding him down? Of course, the pepper spray got all over everybody. Of course it did. And that it's not like Tyre Nichols fought his way to his feet at that point. When he got pepper sprayed in your face, your first reaction is to get your arms up to your face. But what it tells me is this: these officers who had control of his limbs then released him because they were then reaching for their face or their skin or what was ever happening when the pepper spray was hitting their bodies. That's what gave Tyre Nichols the opportunity to get up and run. And a lot of people say Tyre Nichols was running for his life right then. There are some people who would say that Tyre Nichols should have just complied. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think that's triggering for a lot of people, especially in the Black community, to say that Tyre Nichols, after being subjected to that over what was supposed to be a routine traffic stop, was supposed to just sit there and comply when he was already complying. But there are people out there that are saying that. There's other people out there that are saying that he was running for his life. If you want to watch the videos, you can. It's pretty brutal. But the thing that really bugged me, I mean, I hate saying it bugged me the most, but the thing that sits with me that I want to make a point to everybody listening to this is that officer saying they're chasing him down the street. I hope they stomp his ass. I hope they stomp his ass. What does that tell you about Memphis police? What does that tell you? And I'm telling you, I'm former law enforcement. So I'm telling you, if I'm biased anyway, I'm biased towards law enforcement usually being justified in using force when they need to, even on routine traffic stops. I'm biased that way. That's why I reserved judgment until I saw the body camera. And when I saw the body camera, I was appalled. And what this statement by this officer, I hope they stomp his ass, it means that Memphis police have a practice of people who do not comply or resist, they get stomped. There's going to be a point made to these people who run or resist. The appropriate thing to say was, I hope they take him into custody without incident. I hope this doesn't become a whole thing tonight where we have half the force out on the scene. I hope a couple guys can take him into custody without incident on this routine traffic stop, and we don't have to waste any police manpower on this routine traffic stop. That we don't need to do that. That we can be out patrolling the streets to make things are safe, make sure that the city is safe. That is the mentality of police, not I hope they stomp his ass. And a lot of people are calling for this particular officer to be charged. He has not been charged. Well, I'll tell you why he's not charged, because he stayed with the vehicle. Now, whatever he said there, I hope they stomp his ass. And maybe he did arrive to the scene later. You can't tell in the body cam what race this officer is, but everybody online is saying this is a white officer who said that. If I have to go based just off his voice and profile him, I'll say, yeah, he did sound like a Southern white guy. He did. But people are saying he's not charged because he's white. You need to charge the white officer. I don't know about that. I left everybody else to kind of, do their conjecture, but the DA's office out there in Shelby County is still doing investigation. They're not saying that more charges are not coming down the pipeline. They did move pretty quickly with the grand jury indictment here. So you have to applaud what the DA's office is doing right now. And, people can say that the DA's office is moving forward because of political pressure. Well, yeah, that's true. They are. But at least they're moving forward. At least they've levied charges. I mean, sometimes in cases like this, you don't see a second-degree murder charge levied at officers. And so the fact that they took this step, indicted, arrested, put these guys into custody, that was a big step. But charging the officer who made that comment, as offensive as that comment was, they'll have to get creative in the charging document to be able to bring this officer in if he did not actually participate in the beating. At the very least, maybe he was on the scene with a lot of other officers who could be charged for not rendering aid, even though they weren't part of the beating. Okay, so let's move forward. Let's move to the second video, because that's basically the end of the first body cam. But that body cam is super important because it shows the initial interaction. And that body cam is super important because the next two body cams that we watch of the actual beating and the aftermath of the beating, these police on body cam are now recounting what they say happened at the initial traffic stop and what they say happened at the beating. And this initial body cam from this officer, and maybe there's more body cam out there, we don't know. I did see that they wanted to release some more, but I don't know if these other officers turned on their body cam or didn't have body cam or didn't turn them on. That's a whole nother issue. But this initial body cam is contrary and contradicts what these officers put into their reports and what these officers were saying on body cam after the beating of Tyre Nichols. So let's flash forward. Let's flash forward to the second piece of body cam. Okay. The second piece of body cam is an officer who is basically Tyre Nichols is on foot, and this officer comes and actually takes Tyre Nichols down to the ground. Okay. Takes Tyre Nichols down, and there's not a fight put up by Tyre Nichols. He's taken down to the ground pretty easily, and this body cam doesn't really show a lot because at some point in the interaction, the body cam kind of falls off the shoulder, wherever the officer's wearing it. And that happens all the time. Okay. I don't think there's anything nefarious about that. But the body cam fell off. So most of what we're seeing after the initial takedown of Tyre Nichols is audio. And the audio paints two stories. Okay. The audio paints the story of one officer who is, or all the officers who they are being aggressive again. Like, get on the ground. Give us your hands. Give us your hands. And everything about what you're listening to on the audio from the officers, and this is interesting. Everything we're listening to from the audio of the officers makes it sound like they are meeting heavy resistance from a suspect and that they are using the force necessary to get somebody subdued and into custody. If you listen to the audio from them. Okay. Again, when you listen to the audio of Tyre Nichols is not sounding aggressive towards them anymore. He goes down to the ground and he starts screaming. And this was maybe the part that I had the hardest time watching. Was he starts screaming out. He screams 3 times. He says, "Mom! Mom! Mom!" And at this point, we know that these officers, they've been pummeling him. He hasn't tried to get to his feet. 2 officers are on top pummeling him. A third officer comes in. And what do? They pepper spray him again. And immediately he puts his hands back to his face again, right? Because that is what you do when you get pepper sprayed in the eyes. And after the third time, he screams for his mom. And it was so hard to watch because while you're watching this, you know that this man is about to get beat to death and he's going to die a couple of days later. You're watching this after the fact. So knowing that outcome and watching a grown man yell for his mom, to scream for his mom in that moment, I mean, what else can you say is going through a man's mind? He's in absolute fear at this point. But then he says something interesting. I want everybody to take note of this. He wipes the pepper spray from his face and he says, "All right." And it's kind of a sighing. "All right." Like, okay, I'm caught. These cops are going to do what they're going to do. Basically, he's giving up at that point. That's the tone of his voice. Okay, let's pause with what's going on in that body cam. And let's fast forward to the third piece of body cam. So this officer arrives on the scene after the mom, after the, "all right." And these officers, they're still tussling with Tyre Nichols for some reason. And they're really acting like it's impossible to get this guy in cuffs. So this officer arrives on the scene and he whips out a baton on his body cam. Why this officer even turned his body cam on at this point, I have no idea if this was the action that he was about to take here. But he did, and we have this as evidence against these officers. He whips out his baton. And for those of you who don't know what a baton is, it's a metal baton. They whip out they're about a foot long when they're retracted. You take it off your belt and you whip it out violently, and it whips out to about 3 feet long, 4 feet long, and they're metal and they're solid. And to even get these things to go back retracted, you have to slam them with a lot of force onto the concrete to even make them retract. You see a lot of Secret Service, law enforcement carry these, FBI agents. And I'm going to tell you, if you ever want to not get into a fight, you whip out one of these batons. Just the act of when you whip this thing out, the intimidation factor. It's like, this is at a 10 out of 10. But normal citizens can't get these batons. You just can't go to the store and buy these batons. Okay? That's how deadly of a weapon they are. You know, this is for law enforcement only or black market. Well, this officer whips out this baton, and what he says is, I'm going to baton the F out of you. He screams that. And he makes his way over to the other side of Tyre Nichols, to the backside of him, where Tyre Nichols is up on one arm now, still on the ground. He's up on one arm. And the officers that are holding him, they kind of back up a little bit. Why? Because they know that this officer is about to baton the F out of him. And they better get out of the way because this baton is going to do damage to anything it hits. And he proceeds to baton the F out of Tyre Nichols 3 times in the arm that he is kind of up on while he's on the ground. And I'm going to tell you, we haven't gotten the medical records. We haven't gotten the autopsy report. But I'll guarantee you that every time he was struck with that baton, it was fracturing his arm. I guarantee you. These things do more damage than a baseball bat. Think about it like that. So this officer batons him 3 times in the arm. That is interesting about that body cam footage, other than what we're going to get to after the beatdown, that these 2 body cams during the fight catch after the beatdown when the officers are kind of talking to each other about what happened and telling the officers who are then arriving on the scene what happened. But we'll get to that because I want to get to the 4th video now. The 4th video is video that is on a pole across the street. And if not for this video, we would not have a clear picture of what happened here. This video is on a pole across the street, and it catches the entire interaction between officers and Tyre Nichols and the aftermath with perfection. There's no audio on it. That's why the audio on the body cams of the officer is very probative as to what happened. But the video, this is what this video shows. One officer has Tyre Nichols on the ground. He's got him on the ground. The officer standing over him. A second officer comes up and for a second, pulls the first officer up a little bit almost as in, if you're reading body language, ease up. Just for a second though, because that second officer, after doing that for a second, then joins in. And we know and then they begin pummeling him with punches, both of them. They're pummeling. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so they've just taken Tyre Nichols to the ground after they've caught up with him in this neighborhood. The surveillance then shows once they have him on the ground, a third officer comes up, runs in, and starts kicking Tyre Nichols in the face. Not once, not twice, 3 times, if I'm recounting correctly. 3 times in the face on a man who's on the ground, who's already been pummeled, already been pepper sprayed. Kicks him 3 times. Then we see a 4th officer arrive. This is baton guy. We already know what he said when he whipped out that baton. It shows him whipping out the baton, shows him coming around, shows how many times he struck Tyre Nichols in that arm. Right after that, Tyre Nichols either stands up on his own volition or is stood up by these officers. Now, there's people who differ and disagree about it. You know, to me, it doesn't really matter if he stood up on his own or if the officer stood him up. The fact is, what happened when he was on his feet, this is a man who was basically already beaten down. He really poses no threat. You have 4 officers standing around him, beating the hell out of him. He's on his feet. 2 officers restrain his arms. 1 officer on one arm, 1 officer on the other. And this is like something out of a movie. The 3rd officer, while they're standing him up, doing everything except holding him in a full Nelson, the 3rd officer starts laying punches down, raining punches down on Tyre Nichols. And the first one, I'm going to tell you right now, the first one, I would have been knocked out cold if I took that shot. I would have been knocked out cold. Probably would have snapped my neck. The first one came with such viciousness and velocity on a man who's being stood up with arms restrained by two people, man, it really snapped his neck. And this officer came from 2 feet away, took 2 steps, almost like a super punch. If you guys watch UFC, and that was the first punch, the first of how many? 5. And this officer, I think when I'm looking at the body cam, this officer who's doing the punching, he's the biggest one out there. He's got to be the biggest, strongest one out there. So he punches him once, and then Tyre Nichols is basically out on his feet, and he's following Tyre Nichols around, and he's punching him again and again, and then the 4th one and 5th one. Oh my God! Talk about just really cocking your fist all the way back, measuring your punch on a man who's got his arms held behind him. And the 5th one finally rocked Tyre Nichols so hard that Tyre Nichols just went down to his knees. The interaction's not over. As he's down, a 5th officer runs in, kicks Tyre Nichols in the head one more time. What it appeared to me right then was, and I'm just reading body language here, this is a guy who's going to get his lick in before everything's said and done. He's going to get in his lick. Why? Because they're going to stomp his ass. They're going to stomp his ass because he ran from the scene. And they're going to make a point. Just like that white officer said back at the initial arrest, I hope they stomp his ass. Well, they did. And they made their point. After this, they handcuff Tyre Nichols. They drag him about 8 feet over, and they sit him on a sedan that's sitting there. And now the fight's over. And Tyre Nichols is sitting there. And that's really, other than that on that surveillance, that is really the telling part of that surveillance. Other than what it was also a very tough part for me to watch was, 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes. I didn't time it, but 10, 15, 20 minutes go by. And no one is rendering aid to Tyre Nichols. He's just sitting there. No ambulance arrives on the scene. We know a couple paramedics went over there and tried to talk to him. And you see Tyre Nichols slump over to his right. He just falls down on his right side at some point off the car. They sit him up again. He slumps back down over to his left. And if we flash back to a little bit more of the body cam of this going on, Tyre Nichols can't even talk at this point. He's just moaning. We know that paramedics then asked him, what drugs are you on? Tyre Nichols, he is able to say one thing. He goes, alcohol. And they say, look, man, just tell us what you're on. We're trying to get you right. And the reason why they're saying that is because, look, paramedics and medical personnel, if they have to give you some kind of drugs, painkillers, whatever have you, they like to know what's in your system. If you happen to be in danger of overdosing, there's things they can give you to counteract that overdose. But Tyre Nichols, he says it twice. Alcohol. That's the only thing he had that night. We haven't seen the autopsy yet, but I have no reason to disagree with this man because there's a reason why in hearsay law, you hear that thrown around in court. Hearsay. It's hearsay. You can't say that. It's hearsay. Well, there's an exception to the hearsay rule. One of the exceptions is statements made for purposes of medical treatment. If paramedics or doctors are asking a person something and they say it, it's admissible in court because it has so much indicia of reliability. You're not going to lie to the doctors and paramedics about what's in your system when you know they're about to treat you. So this is where the body cam gets really interesting. So now the body cam is showing all the officers after the fact, and they're doing what anybody would do in the situation. They're decompressing from this really exciting, and I'm not saying exciting in a good way. I mean excitement, your body, your adrenaline, all this is run. And now they're kind of recounting what happened. And so the officers are saying, oh man, he's strong. Man, he's strong. He's so strong. He got to be on something. Meaning that he's got to be on drugs. And that he's just so strong that it was like superhuman strength. Which would do what? It would tend to justify them using the force that they had to use on him. He was so strong. They couldn't get a hold of him, and he was resisting. This guy's on something. Because he has to be on something, because for him to resist those 5 officers, I got to say it again. These 5 officers, they are big boys. These are big guys, man. And Tyre Nichols is not. So that's the first thing that's really interesting. He's strong. He must be on drugs. Second, they say when they first pulled him out of the car, he swung on them. He swung. He was immediately combative. And that he swung on them when they went to go take him down. Well, we know from the body cam that is not corroborated. Okay. Tyre Nichols was never combative when he came out of that car at the initial traffic stop. Okay. He wasn't. And Tyre Nichols was not combative when he was taken down at the scene where he was beat to death. There is no evidence showing that Tyre Nichols swung first. And even if he did, it doesn't justify the beating they put on him. You got to use reasonable force. And here's the real interesting thing that they say on body cam. And this is the thing. This is why people have a distrust of police. This is why they have it. They say he reached and grabbed one of the officer's firearms, one of the guns in the holster. Tyre Nichols grabbed onto it, and they couldn't get his arm off of it. He was trying to pull that gun out of the holster. 2 officers corroborate that to each other on body cam. None of this shown by the video, okay? None of this shown by the video. And I'm going to tell you this. This is how you know this is a bold-faced lie. When you listen to the audio of the body cam, are you going to sit here and tell me that these officers on body cam, if they were meeting heavy resistance from a man who's so strong and on drugs and is resisting as they're painting it on body cam audio, that when he actually grabs one of their guns and won't release it, and they're trying to, and not only that officer, but another officer, they're trying to get his hand off the firearm and they can't, that not one of them actually mentions it on the audio of the body cam. Not one of them goes, hey, he's grabbed my gun. He grabbed my gun. Get him off my gun. I can't get his hand off your gun. You would hear something. But there's nothing of that. It's just a recount after the fact. Oh, this guy was strong. He swung at us. He was combative, and he grabbed our firearm. And that's why this man is slumped over there on the car from the beatdown we just gave him. The body cam also has a recounting of these officers of why they initially pulled Tyre Nichols over. This officer, who I believe is the same officer that was laying those sucker punches on him one after another until Tyre Nichols went down to his knee. He says, the guy was driving erratically and I tried to pull him over and he wouldn't pull over. And then Tyre Nichols actually drove his car like kind of in a U-turn. I don't even know what this officer's talking about, but in a U-turn, almost hit the officer's car, he says. He almost hit my car. Came that close to hitting my car. I said, what? So when we go pull him over, he won't stop. And then he stops at this red light and puts his turn signal on. That's where we picked up on body cam, because there's no body camera footage of everything this officer is saying for the reason for the stop. Our body cam picks up at the red light when this officer who's saying what happened is running up to Tyre Nichols' car, dragging him out the car, ripping open his door and dragging him out the car. So what's real interesting here is the Memphis police chief came out maybe yesterday, maybe the day before, and says they've been doing an internal investigation and they cannot find any evidence to corroborate the reason for the traffic stop. They can't find anything to corroborate it. That maybe this was an unreasonable traffic stop to begin with. Okay. What kind of things would the police be looking for to corroborate the traffic stop? I'm going to tell you, from my experience in law enforcement, there's several things they're going to look at. Number one is body cam. Okay. If these officers are equipped with body cam, and we don't know that yet. We don't know that. But Memphis is a big city. Most officers have body cam. Usually you would turn on your body cam as soon as you're getting into any kind of traffic stop situation, especially if you think you're going to go rip somebody's door open. This officer, there was no body cam released from this officer, but this is what they would look at. Okay. But the Memphis police chief said something that makes me think there was no body cam from this officer. Either he's not wearing one or he didn't turn it on. And that's because they said, we can't rule out that there was no reason. Can't prove a negative. We're just saying we can't find any evidence to corroborate what these officers are saying, why he was initially pulled over. So what does that tell you? That If the body cam would either show the reason for the traffic stop or show that he's lying about the traffic stop. So what that tells me is there was no body cam. And if there's no body cam because he didn't turn on his body cam, that's an issue. That's a real big issue for Memphis police right now and these officers involved, given everything that just happened here. Matter of fact, they might be mad at the guy who turned on his body cam, right? At the initial traffic stop, they go, look, nobody turned on their body cam when we're about to do something like this. But I digress. Maybe I'm just speculating there. Let's get back to the point, though. The police chief cannot corroborate it. So first, they would look at body cam. Second, they would look at, and this is pretty important here, dispatch communication records. What that means is this. Even before body cam, this goes back 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You radio dispatch. Whenever you're out there in the streets and you're about to have an interaction, you're calling into dispatch. Hey, I got this police code of this and this going on. This is what I'm about to do. Requesting backup. Officers are all communicating through the radio. That's how they're able to coordinate. And the dispatchers coordinate. And the dispatchers keep logs of this. They're called CAD logs. Computer-aided dispatch logs, I think. And there's like shorthand notes. And every officer's call sign is on the side, on one column. And what they're communicating to dispatch is being shorthand right there. You know, reason for traffic stop, suspect in custody, suspect fleeing on the run in this direction, right? Because cops are not only listening to their radios, but they're also always looking at this CAD update on their computers in their car. So what this tells me is they reviewed the CAD and there's nothing radioed into dispatch about this reckless driving incident, about this officer about to go take this guy out of the car. So that would be a breach of, even proper protocol and procedure in the police department. But not only is there a CAD log, the paper, the radio communications themselves from the officers are all recorded and preserved. Okay. If Memphis isn't doing that, then they're doing something different than most jurisdictions, and they're a big city. All the radio communications are preserved. So they reviewed radio communications from this officer and the other officers who said Tyre Nichols was recklessly driving, and that's why they pulled him over, and they couldn't find anything to corroborate it. So at this point, yeah, you can't prove the negative, but the fact that these things don't exist, there's a reason why the police chief made an official statement and said, look, it looks like this entire traffic stop was complete BS. And so that's the breakdown of what the body camera shows us, why the body camera is important, what would be seen if you go onto that Vimeo website and decide to look at it. And just to harken back to this, the fact that he was screaming out for his mom, it really troubled me. Well, come to find out, he was about 80 yards from his mom's house where the beating took place. So when he ran from his car, he was really trying to run to his mom's house, and he was almost there. And he thought he was in earshot of his mom when he was starting to get beaten by these officers again, and he screamed out for her. And what I've seen in the press is that Tyre Nichols' mom has not watched the body cam, and she doesn't want to. And I say, do not watch this, because it struck me because I started looking at Tyre Nichols screaming for mom as if my son, even grown, after you spent your whole life raising this boy up, is screaming out for his dad. And I'm not there to protect him. And then he dies. And I'm 80 yards away. That's tough. I started thinking about it from my son's mom's perspective. As a mother, that maternal bond to your child. I mean, a father's bond. I mean, I understand that, but the maternal bond to her son, screaming out for her protection while these guys are viciously beating him down, stomping him. We're gonna go to commercial, and when we come back, we are going to get into some of the legalities going on here, some of the rumors that are circulating around about the motives of these officers in the case, who these officers are, the unit they operate in, and we're going to take some calls. If you want to call in, our line is 702-221-7283. That's 702-221-7283. I'm Thomas Moskal, former prosecutor in Las Vegas, and you're listening to Pushing the Limits.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Shapiro from Pushing. I want to tell you guys about Sahara West Urgent Care and Wellness. They're conveniently located on the southwest corner of Sahara and Jones. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Sahara West Urgent Care, they'll take care of all your healthcare needs. They offer routine services such as physicals, STD testing, car accident treatment, and work injuries. You name it, they do it. They have on-site X-ray, EKG, ultrasound, and labs. They treat chronic conditions such as asthma, blood pressure, diabetes, and more. They also offer general wellness exams and treatments such as testosterone enhancement and cancer screening. They're located on Sahara, 6125 West Sahara Avenue. Their number is 702-248-0554. And the best part, they accept most major insurances and affordable cash pay prices. Office visits starting at just $95. And I'm also a client, so please give them a call, 702-248-0554.
Hey everybody, are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. Located at 467 East Silverado Ranch Boulevard, just off of Premier Road, half a mile east of South Point Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super. Hero, that is. Because why be a sub when you can be a hero? Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
Is your dog suffering from a sensitive stomach? Hi, it's Kelly the Cookie Lady from Mooch's Munchies. Our dogs had super sensitive tummies, and I needed to find a low-fat treat that wouldn't give them gas or other issues. Most of the treats on the market were loaded with fillers, chemicals, and chicken fat. Many of them weren't even food. Well, I knew I could do better, so I developed Mooch's Munchies, and I'm happy to be able to share them with you. Stop by our store or our website, moochesmunchies.com, and find out why we say that Mooch's Munchies are totally awesome.
Zinworld Premium CBD offers full and broad-spectrum CBD oil, extracts, and capsules, which are designed to help you feel your best. Their products are sourced from the best organic hemp and natural ingredients on the market, and are tested for quality, purity, and potency. We have a full range of items from health and wellness to beauty to pets. Call 725-205-9223. Visit online at zinworld.com or stop by their location at 9895 South Maryland Parkway and Silverado Ridge Parkway. Mention KSHP for 10% off in store or use code KSHP online for 15% off.
As a three-time international award-winning restaurant, Joe's New York Pizza uses only the freshest and best available ingredients. From giant slices of hand-tossed pie to calzones, strombolis, fingers, and wings, Joe's serves all your favorites. Stop in for a slice at one of their two Las Vegas locations at Paradise and Harmon or South Las Vegas Boulevard, or you can check out their menu at joesnewyorkpizzalv.com.
STN Sports is the only sports betting app you need this season. STN Sports has it all. In-play betting, mobile parlay cards, the Play Plus card to fund and withdraw from anywhere in Nevada, and the latest lines on every game. STN Sports even lets you earn rewards on every bet. Safe and easy betting from your phone or tablet. Go to stationcasinosports.com or sign up at any Station Casino, Fiesta Wildfire, or the El Cortez. Details at the sportsbooks.
The hits, the highlight reel performances. Get into the unforgettable action with up-close access at college football's premier showcase event at the 2023 East-West Shrine Bowl, Thursday, February 2nd at Allegiant Stadium. Watch top players from across the country ahead of NFL Draft Day, benefiting amazing care at Shriners Children's. Purchase your tickets today at shrinebowl.com. It's the 98th East-West Shrine Bowl. Today's All-Stars, tomorrow's legend.
The fastest weekend of the year is heading back to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, March 3rd through 5th for the Pennzoil 400. As NASCAR swings west, this race is right here in our own backyard. High speeds, trading paint, and all-out racing action make it a great choice for exhilarating entertainment.
Bowman, the showman, has won at Las Vegas in overtime.
Las Vegas Motor Speedway treats locals right. Free parking all the time. What happens in Vegas, the locals attend.
A showroom at South Point presents Forever Fab, a tribute to the Beatles. Plus, a musical journey through the 60s with 60s Mania. You'll love the music and February 17th to 19th. Tickets at the box office, online at southpointcasino.com or charged by phone 702-797-8055. Forever Fab plus 60s Mania at the South Point. Back by popular demand, the showroom at South Point presents Human Nature, one of the most dynamic vocal groups ever. February 7th to the 9th. Tickets at the box office, online at southpointcasino.com or charged by phone 702-797-8055. They're back with an outstanding show, Human Nature at the South Point. One of the most dynamic entertainers to ever grace the stage. The showroom at South Point presents entertainer Frankie Marino. People just can't get enough of this spectacular show. February 3rd and 4th. Tickets to the box office, online at southpointcasino.com or charged by phone 702-797-8055. Frankie Marino at the South Point.
And welcome back. We are back on Pushing the Limits. Turn my headphones up a little bit. We're back on Pushing the Limits. Thomas Moskal, Las Vegas criminal lawyer here, former chief prosecutor here in Vegas for 7 years. We're talking about Tyre Nichols, the beating that resulted in his death out there in Memphis back on January 7th, and everything that's come out since they released the body cam last Friday. In the last segment, I really broke down each of the 4 body cam videos and what the takeaways were on those videos, what people should be looking for when they're watching those videos, and what was important, the discrepancies, the contradictions, and really 2 stories being told. Tyre Nichols, who was being compliant when he was yanked out of his car, officers being super aggressive, beating him, getting rough with him, pepper spraying him running from the scene when officers caught up to him. They did exactly what an officer said on body cam he wanted them to do, which is when they catch him, I hope they stop him. They stopped him, and Tyre Nichols died a few days later from all the injuries that he suffered. We haven't seen medical records, but what we've heard is multiple neck fractures, which doesn't surprise me from what we saw. He definitely had to have severe brain damage from all the kicks that he was taking to the head, punches to the head. He was defenseless at this point, and I wouldn't be surprised if his arm was broken in several places from being beton. So that video is available. What I want to get into now is a little bit about the police who did this, right? And so they were part of a unit out there in Memphis called the Scorpion Unit. Let me get this right. The Scorpion Unit for street crimes operations to restore peace in our neighborhoods. Scorpion Unit. And these 5 officers were all members of this unit. This unit has been disbanded since this happened. But what it comes down to is this. Look, the Scorpion Unit was a unit of officers that was pretty much given carte blanche to do things their way in order to, try to take the fight to the criminals. That's their mentality. Okay, they're going to be aggressive. They're taking the fight to the criminals. And on Saturday, Brian Shapiro and I, we did a live show, and we had somebody from Memphis who actually came on, a guy named Bobby Davis, and he had been beaten by officers back in 2010. And he talked about, he's on the Memphis streets. He talked about the Scorpion Unit and what the community feels about the Scorpion Unit down there. And what it is when this Scorpion Unit rolls out, they're all in unmarked Dodge Chargers, which, let me tell you something about Dodge Chargers. I think Brian Shapiro drives a Dodge Charger, so Brian, forgive me on this, but it really, there's a certain kind of person that likes to drive a Dodge Charger. They don't make the best decisions. They usually are aggressive. I'm no disrespect to Brian. But they drive these unmarked Dodge Chargers around, and they get super aggressive anytime they hit the street, and the whole community knows it. When the Scorpion Unit shows up, watch out. Watch out. And so they're digging a little bit deeper into what this Scorpion Unit was really doing. And so everybody knows to be scared when you see the Scorpion unit. And the Scorpion unit, they are not out. Here's the thing. The Scorpion unit is not out there doing routine traffic stops. They're not traffic cops. Okay? Anybody out there remember training day? You remember Officer Hoyt? Ethan Hawke? Hey, there's these two guys beating up this girl in the back alley. Denzel said, "Man, forget about that, man. Leave that for patrol." Right? We're a specialized unit. And what happened in training day? That specialized unit was going rogue. They felt like the law did not apply to them. And that's what's going on with this Scorpion unit. And so all eyes are now on this now disbanded Scorpion unit. And there's people who are coming out now and saying, look, we were also victims of these overly aggressive officers. One story that just broke is a 19-year-old, and his name is Maurice Chalmers Stokes. He wouldn't even show his face on the news when he gave the interview because he said, I don't want retaliation. But he's going to be forthcoming. On October 1st, 2022, he says, and I quote, I was trying not to be scared, but I was scared. He's walking down Chelsea Avenue on University Street, and cars started following him. And the cops inside those cars were wearing ski masks. This is how the Scorpion unit rolls around. This is the kind of intimidation factor that they put on people out there in Memphis. They hopped out and bum rushed me. They're like, let me check your backpack. Do not run. And he ran out of fear. I ended up taking off running. I bounced off the gate. I hit my head on the gate. He would learn after the fact. The people that were chasing him were police. He didn't even realize that these guys were cops. They're hopping out of an unmarked Dodge Charger trying to take his backpack in ski masks. So he didn't know who they were. They were in unmarked cars like regular cars. I'm not thinking they're police officers. I ran because I was scared for my life. And he had to speak out after he found out what happened to Tyre Nichols. When he grabbed me by my backpack, he pushed me to the gate and he cut my head up. And it was one of these officers actually involved. He threw me over and he acted like he was going to punch me. He was never told why the police were chasing him. And he complained about his head injury, but there was no attention. We look deeper and deeper into this Scorpion unit. You're going to get a ton of these stories. A ton of these stories. I mean, just look at the body cam of how they came up on what was supposedly a routine traffic stop on Tyre Nichols, the way they approached that. They're out there banging heads. And he ran and they wanted to teach him a lesson. And they're not teaching him a lesson for Tyre Nichols' sake. Okay? And I'm going to say this, and I know, look, I'm not black. I'm half Korean. Okay? But I know a thing or two about history, and I've been educated a little bit on what goes on. And, you know, there's something that still goes on today what the Scorpion unit was doing that was going on back in slavery times. It's called buck breaking. If nobody's ever heard about that. Okay? And you know what buck breaking was back in slavery times? Buck breaking was when they took the biggest, strongest slave and they beat him to death in front of the other slaves. That's to keep everybody else in line. If they did it to the biggest, strongest one of us, what's going to happen to me? Keep them scared. That's what the Scorpion unit was doing when they're making an impression on the community out there. For years, they've been making an impression on that community out there. When the Scorpion unit rolls through and their Dodge Chargers and their ski masks and they come out, they're banging heads. And if you even think about getting out of line, they're going to make an example out of you. And that's what they were doing with Tyre Nichols. They were making an example out of him. And these guys are pros at it because if you go back to the body cam, the way they were painting the story on the body cam through their audio and what they were saying was not reflecting what was actually going on in the situation. The way they're speaking on the body cam, they're meeting heavy resistance, but they weren't. So the Scorpion unit is now disbanded completely. It looked like there was no oversight. I mean, this was like one of the units in the police department that people were probably trying to get on. Maybe feeling like they're making a difference in the community. But man, the training that these officers receive to think that this is the way you're operating out there, we're going to dig more into the Scorpion unit. There's more to come. This is the beginning of the story. What's going out there in the Scorpion unit. And a lot of major cities have units that are specialized. Out here, in Vegas, we have the gang unit. And I'm not saying the gang unit is operating like the Scorpion unit, but there are specialized units in all police departments. And they're supposed to handle certain things. And What they're not supposed to be doing is out there conducting routine traffic stops and scaring the community. I mean, the fact that these cops are probably out there conducting unreasonable searches, unconstitutional searches, unconstitutional seizures, constantly. So that's the Scorpion unit. That's where these officers were from. That's the history on that. Another interesting thing has come to light. I, like many people, when the police chief and the DA's office and the Tennessee Investigation Bureau, DIB, they're all decided to release this body in an effort to be transparent. And transparency is what's needed now when incidents like this happen. And they're being transparent, not because they want to be transparent, if not for all the protests and the riots and the things that have been happening over the past, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Police departments wouldn't be so apt to do this. But the FBI, the feds have come in. They said, look, we want to be the gold standard in law enforcement. When we have some kind of use of force or officer-involved shooting, you got to be transparent with the community right away. We do not want people, we don't want our communities to riot. We don't want that. And so I congratulated them. I said, all right, man, to release that body cam 3 weeks after the fact and move forward with these indictments, it should be applauded. And I was saying, all right, this police chief is doing the right thing. And come to find out, this police chief has a little bit of a checkered past. This is the thing. When an incident like this happens, finally everyone is really taking a close look at everybody involved. And people are pointing the finger at the police chief. Of course, he's overseeing a department that has the Scorpion unit running amok. They're looking at her. And she did release the body cam, but let's talk about her checkered past. Well, she's not born and raised in Memphis. Okay? She was a police major in Atlanta years ago before she took the Memphis job. And what we've come to find out is this police chief, while she was a major, she shut down an investigation into a child pornographer. She shut it down. She shut it down because a sergeant working under her, a female sergeant, was married to this guy. And they had found him with child pornography. And they found that he was involved with this. And she shut down the investigation. They never filed charges. They didn't follow up. And we would have never known about it except the feds were doing their own concurrent investigation into this guy. And they charged him. They indicted him. He pled guilty. And then they looked into why the Atlanta police ceased their investigation of this guy. And they turned up the fact that she used her position of power to protect an officer's child pornographer husband. She shut it down. She was demoted to lieutenant, and subsequently she was off the Atlanta Police Force. But isn't it great how, especially in government, and I witnessed it for years, the most inept and people who have done wrongs always land on their feet in government. And the people who are trying to do the right thing end up bounced out of government sometimes, or forced out, or they just get out because they're banging their head against the wall. Well, she landed on her feet. So after she does that, which no child pornography to shut down the investigation, her next gig is police chief of Memphis. More money, more clout, more benefits, more everything, more power. So they're looking into her. She has a little bit of a checkered past. People are calling for her to resign or her to be fired. I mean, we'll see what's going to come out of that. So now we're getting into another update recently is that as they are ongoing, they're doing their ongoing investigation. Now they're looking into the people who did not personally involve themselves or participate in the beating of Tyre Nichols. Those 5 officers are already charged. Now they're looking into some of the other people. The 2 fire department personnel that were on the scene, they were actually checking on Tyre Nichols a little bit, but not really showing any urgency. They've been fired. I think maybe 3. I think it was 3 fire department personnel now fired. And we've had 2 sheriff deputies from Shelby County Sheriff's Office who were on the scene after the beating have been put on administrative leave. And 2 more Memphis police officers have been put on administrative leave. We're going to see some more charges coming down the pipeline. Of that, I have no doubt. They're not going to be charging these people with second-degree murder because a legal test that has to be met to even try to prosecute somebody for second-degree murder. But some of these other charges that have come down, such as you know, official misconduct by failure to act when there is a duty imposed by law. I can see that coming down on a lot of people. A lot of people who were at the scene. It only took, and you know what? It probably wouldn't have saved this young man's life, but it would only take one person on that scene to say, "We need medical here right now. We need an ambulance here right now," to really show some urgency to get some medical attention down there. And maybe it would have made a difference, maybe not. But for these officers to be hoo-haing it up after the fact, decompressing, and then spinning their story on body cam into everybody who's showing up of what happened, the utter disregard and indifference to human life that they showed, they knew what kind of physical punishment they just put on that man. They knew what kind of physical punishment they just put on him. And they sit him up on a car and don't even act like they need to get medical there right away. And then the paramedics show up. These fire department paramedics show up and they're acting with no urgency. Of course, they're not told the full extent of the situation. I got to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt on that. But man, you would think somebody's like, go get this guy checked out. Here's what a police officer does. If you really have to beat somebody to get them into custody, and you know that you just batoned them and kicked them in the head multiple times and punched them, get the man some medical attention. You know, here in Vegas, this would be a really, really easy second-degree murder conviction if I was going to trial on it. Because in Vegas, to prove somebody guilty of second-degree murder, you have to prove that in their head, they had a depraved indifference to human life. That they showed that, and it led to somebody's death. And nothing could be more of a depraved indifference to human life and indicative of how they were indifferent to his life than after the beating, handcuffing him, sitting him in the car, and not even caring if he got medical attention or not, and letting all that time go by. It'd be different if these officers, after they beat him, as soon as they got him handcuffed, they started going wild, calling him for medical. That'd be different. That'd be different. But that's where we're going to get into some of these charges and the possible sentences that some of these guys can face. Because Tennessee law is a little bit different than Nevada law. And I've been doing some digging. I've been doing some research. And, you know, I'm a little bit surprised by what I'm finding on some of the sentencing laws out there in Tennessee that are very defendant-friendly. And I'm also a little bit worried about the second-degree murder conviction in this case. If I was defending this case, and look, I was a prosecutor for years. I prosecuted some murders, and I'm a defense attorney. So I know how to think about these things and how we're going to defend this case. You got to look at the charges and what the legal requirements of the charges are. So first, let's look at the top charge on the bill, second-degree murder, okay? Second-degree murder, if you look it up online in Tennessee, carries a 15 to 60-year penalty. So you might be saying to yourself, oh, man, that's all right, 60 years, that's more than enough for what happened. Even 15 years might be more than enough for what happened. I don't know. Some people think they should go away for life. Well, here, let's break down what that really means. Let's talk about sentencing ranges in Tennessee, okay? 15 to 60 years is the range. But Tennessee law has 3 ranges in sentencing. They have range 1, range 2, and range 3. So for second-degree murder, range 1 is 15 to 25 years. Range 2 is 25 to 40 years. Range 3 is 40 to 60 years. So range 3, there's certain factors that put you into range 1, 2, or 3. So range 3, you're basically a prolific criminal. You have a large criminal history, a lifetime criminal. Now you're in range 3. Minimum you can get is 40. Maximum is 60. These officers, they would not be police officers if they ever fit into range 2 or 3. If they could ever by law fit into those, they would not be on the police force. I'm going to tell you. Okay? So they're all going to be range 1. So the penalty they're going to face on this second-degree murder, if convicted, is 15 to 25 years. Okay? So let's get into the fact that they are charged with multiple crimes because they're charged with second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping resulting in bodily injury, aggravated kidnapping involving possession of a weapon, official misconduct through unauthorized exercise of power, official misconduct by failure to act when there is a duty imposed by law, and official oppression. Okay. So let's say they're convicted on all those crimes at trial. So you go into sentencing. I was surprised to find out that the judge will not be able to sentence them to consecutive time on these crimes. What that means is you're going to get concurrent time on these crimes. Concurrent meaning your sentences will all run at the same time. So if the top charge is second-degree murder, and you're looking at 15 to 25 years, and the second most serious charge they're looking at is aggravated kidnapping, which is 8 to 30 years, but they got range 1, range 2, range 3. Range 1 is 8 to 12 years. So even if you're sentenced to 12 years on aggravated kidnapping and 15 years on second-degree murder, the judge cannot run those back-to-back, not run those consecutively. They have to be run concurrent. So you're still going to serve whatever your sentence is on your most serious crime. That's the time you're going to serve. And the reasons for that is under Tennessee law, there's certain factors that are required to be sentenced on multiple convictions for the same act consecutively. Okay? And these factors under the statute are you have a life of crime, you have an extensive criminal history, are you psychologically dangerous, as determined by psychological evaluation, that you have repetitive compulsive behavior without regard to consequences, you show no hesitation about committing a crime to which human life is high, the risk to human life is high. You have multiple offenses about sex abuse with a minor. Did you commit this offense while you were on probation? Those are the factors right there. None of those factors will apply in the Tyre Nichols case. So consecutive time, the judge does not have discretion to even sentence to consecutive time. Now, those of you might be out there say, well, 15 years is more than enough for what these guys did. Or 25 years if the judge decides to give them that is more than enough for what they did. But that's without an understanding of what truth in sentencing is. Okay, I've been in the system too long. Truth in sentencing is a movement in the criminal justice system. It's a movement over the past few decades to go, hey, can we as the public and victims in cases, when we know that somebody is sentenced to a certain amount, are they actually doing that time? They should actually be doing that amount of time, right? Because come to find out, like just because you're sentenced to 15 years, 25 years, look, we've all heard of it, that you don't end up doing that time. Oh, there's time off for good behavior. We've all heard about that, right? And every state has a little different system that they do. So here in Nevada, in Vegas, we've tried to combat that a little bit by saying, okay, the judges can't just announce, let's say they sentence Tyre Nichols or Tyre Nichols killers to 25 years. Okay. Well, the judge also at sentencing on the record has to say when their parole eligibility will be. So it goes 25 years parole eligibility at 10 years, because you have to be parole eligible in Nevada at least 40% of your sentence. Okay. So what that means is if you're doing 5-year prison sentence, you have to be eligible for parole at least at 2 years. So you're coming up for your first parole hearing. And let me tell you, most of these prisons are paroling people out on their first parole hearing. I'm not saying that's going to happen in the Tyre Nichols case. I'm just saying that's what's happening across the board on cases. The prisons are trying to bounce people out because tax resources. So at least in Nevada, we have that. So if somebody gets 25 years, it doesn't mean they're doing 25 years. It means they're doing 10 years. Okay. And they're doing 10 years. And unless you're convicted of the most serious crime, which second degree murder is a category A felony. So you should not be getting good time credits for good behavior off of that 25-year part of it. You shouldn't. So what that means is if you parole out at the 10 years, well, you're going to be on parole for longer. But on some of these other felonies that are lesser than category A, you get good time credits off the top end of that. So your sentence, even the 25 years, is cut down to almost 10 years too. On top of that, there's statutory mechanisms that make sure that people are getting out sooner than what their sentence really is. And I didn't know this as a prosecutor, but I come to find out as a defense attorney that the prisons, they have a lot of discretion on how they dole out these sentences. And so in order to let people go early, they've put programs in place at the prison where you can basically be on a minimum security work release, be back by curfew, and that's part of your prison sentence. So you're on work release. They even have people who go out to house arrest. They're living at their house, playing PlayStation, watching TV, and they're doing their sentence on house arrest. So that's just all, food for thought when people think that 15 or 25 years is going to be enough. that whatever sentence they get, there's no truth in sentencing. Despite the movement over the past few decades, there's less truth in sentencing today than there ever was. I want to get into a few of the actual charges, and let's get into the biggest one here: second-degree murder. So in Tennessee, second-degree murder is the knowing killing of another. That's what it's defined as. And so there's an element that prosecutors have to prove at trial that it was done knowingly. Okay, that's what they have to prove. Every jurisdiction is different, but that's in Tennessee. So in Tennessee, and before we digress into that, I'll tell you here in Nevada, that's not the standard. The definition of second-degree murder in Nevada is someone died as a result of your actions, and you acted with depraved indifference to humanity. And like I said, I would have no problem doing a closing argument in this case in Nevada against these cops because of how they acted after the beating. Is that indicative of what they were thinking in their head? Depraved indifference to humanity? You bet you. But that's not the standard in Tennessee. It's knowingly. And so what that means is, and there's a case that we can look them up. There's multiple cases, but State v. Page, State of Tennessee versus this guy Page back in 2002, said that knowingly means that a person acts with awareness that his conduct is reasonably certain to cause death. Can also be established if they acted intentionally, meaning that their conscious objective was to cause death. Okay, if you didn't catch that little difference between Nevada law and Tennessee law and why I would have no problem convicting these guys as a prosecutor here in Nevada and why I'm a little bit worried about the second-degree murder conviction in Tennessee, let's say it again. In Nevada, all I have to show is that you acted with depraved indifference to human life. In Tennessee, I got to show that you were aware that your conduct was reasonably certain to cause death. So what the prosecutors are going to face over there at trial, if this thing goes to trial, is the defense is going to be, you can't establish, of course we're not disputing that Tyre Nichols died as a result of the beating. But what was in second-degree murder is a crime of it's a mental crime. What was in your head? That's what distinguishes second-degree from first-degree murder. The prosecutors are going to have to prove that these cops were aware that what they did were reasonably certain to cause death. And this is where the whole trial flips on its head. Where in Nevada, I could use their behavior after the fact to say they acted with depraved indifference to humanity. I could see a defense attorney being in Tennessee going, their behavior after the fact showed that they were not reasonably certain that what they just did was going to cause his death. They thought they had just beat a man. They thought they beat him up. They didn't think he was going to die. So that's really the defense out there. And if that defense is successful, the lesser included offense that's going to be there for the jury to deliberate on at trial is reckless homicide. And that means instead of acting knowingly, and this is me as a defense attorney, if I'm up there having to defend these guys, which I would never want to do, but if I did, I'd say they acted recklessly, okay? We're not disputing that Tyre Nichols was killed, and we're not disputing that these guys need to be convicted of a crime, my client, but they didn't act knowingly. They weren't certain that he was going to die. Recklessly means a person is aware of, but consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk that the alleged victim is going to be killed. It's a gross deviation from the standard of care that a normal person would exercise when you're viewing it from the accused person's standpoint. Man, I almost fell asleep just saying that. It took me back to my law school years. But what does that mean? It means this. I'm aware that there was a risk that the victim was going to die, and I consciously disregarded that risk. But I wasn't reasonably certain that what I just did was going to kill him. Do you see how that defense could be viable at a trial? Because here, as a prosecutor, they have to convince every single one of those jurors, 12 jurors, beyond a reasonable doubt, that they're guilty of second-degree murder. That every single one of these officers knew that they were aware that what they just did was reasonably certain to cause Tyre Nichols' death. And when they only need one, and the defense only needs one juror to say, I'm not convinced that they were reasonably certain to cause his death, that what they just did. I'm not convinced that beyond a reasonable doubt about that, but I am convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that they were aware of that there was a risk that he was going to die and that they consciously disregarded that. I could definitely get on board with that. So if you have 12 jurors agreeing on reckless homicide and only 11 jurors agreeing on second-degree murder, guess what? The conviction is going to be reckless homicide. So that is a worry for me in this prosecution for second-degree murder, that these guys can come out with a reckless homicide conviction, which is going to have a substantially lesser sentence, a range 1 sentence for reckless homicide, right? There's a lot of people out there I've seen in my, especially in my TikTok comments on some videos that I'm posting, trying to keep people aware of what's going on my TikTok and little short snippets that are digestible. But a lot of people in the comments are saying it needs to be first-degree murder. That first-degree murder is going to be charged on this case. Okay. I disagree with that. I don't see first-degree murder charges ever coming down on this case. And because first-degree murder, like I said, the difference between first-degree, second-degree, and reckless homicide out there in Tennessee and in all jurisdictions is what was your mindset. And first-degree murder requires it to be premeditated. And premeditated means you had the intent to cause the death of a person. That was your intent. Now, we know, like, textbook premeditation, guy Googles how to poison my wife and kill her without getting caught. 3 months ahead of time, he secures the poison. 2 months ahead of time, he tests out the poison. We're proving all this in court, and then he slips her the poison. That is textbook classic premeditation. But for first-degree murder, you don't need all of that planning. You don't even need a day of planning. You don't need an hour of planning. You don't need a minute of planning. What you need is to be able to prove as a prosecutor that before you did the act that caused the death of somebody, that you intended their death to happen. And that's going to be a tough thing to prove in this case, man. You can say that they intended to beat him, but I don't think the evidence bears out that you can prove through the evidence that we have that they intended to kill him, that they intended to cause his death. I just don't see it. So I agree with the DA's charges in this case, only going for second-degree murder. I agree with it because as a prosecutor, you have an ethical duty not to charge something unless you already feel that you can prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. That's your ethical duty. And right now, I don't see you being able, without further evidence coming out that it was premeditated, I don't see that. And I'm going to share a little story. I prosecuted a guy here in Vegas for first-degree murder. And so he was able to try and argue for second degree and involuntary manslaughter and voluntary manslaughter. And he ended up getting a second degree murder conviction. And that's why, look, out here in Vegas, we just have to show depraved indifference to human life. We don't have to show what they show in Tennessee. But I was chasing the first degree murder conviction. And as vicious and brutal as the beating of Tyre Nichols was on that video, I'm going to tell you the beating of Tyre Nichols pales in comparison to this guy that I prosecuted here in Vegas. Pales in comparison. What this guy did here in Vegas, he was out there on the streets. I'll tell you, this defendant was out there on the streets having a bad day, to put it lightly, looking for some reason to get into a fight with somebody, and there's a homeless guy on the street, and he attacked this homeless guy, and he mounted him in full mount position, and he beat this guy senseless and beat him for minutes. I mean, 5 minutes went by probably. If you've ever been in a fight, 5 minutes is a long time to be in an all-out fight. And he rained down punches on a guy in full mount. For those of you who don't know what full mount is in UFC, usually the ref stops the fight. That's what a professional fighter, when he's fully mounted by somebody and getting punches rained down on him, the ref stopped the fight because your arms are pinned. You can't defend yourself. This guy rained down punch after punch after punch until this poor homeless guy, his face was just meat. Unrecognizable. That's how long he beat this guy. And I argued to the jury in closing. I said, look, in premeditated murder, we're not saying that he intended to cause this guy's death 2 minutes before the fight happened, while the fight was going on in the beginning or even in the middle. But I said, at some point, when this man's unconscious on the ground and you're in full mount position and blood is splattering all over the place and the man's face is turning into meat and you continue to rain punches down on him, at some point before you threw that last punch, in your mind, in this defendant's mind, he intended to cause death. And I thought I had a good case. Couldn't convince the jury, though. The jury They convicted him of second-degree murder. And I talked to the jury afterwards, and a bunch of the jurors agreed with me, but it only took one or two to say no. They didn't feel like he formed that intent. And that's why I say it's a problem in Tennessee. For this case in Tyre Nichols to say that they're going to be guilty of first-degree murder because, they didn't beat him all the way until he died. And I might catch flack for even saying that, but they beat him really good, man. But I don't see the evidence there to sustain an argument at trial that this was evidence of an intent to cause death. And they had that higher standard there for second-degree murder, which sucks. It sucks for Tyre Nichols, the victim in the case. It sucks for the community out there that wants to see justice done on these cops who are supposed to protect the community. They should be held to a higher standard. But right now, there's no law in the book saying you're going to penalize cops harsher. So yeah, that's the issue with the first-degree murder charge out there. And I tried to get this guy, and I'll explain first-degree murder another way. You ever approach a stoplight at an intersection and you see, like maybe as you're approaching, you start watching the pedestrian walk signs and you can see the numbers ticking down and it says 3, 2. So the light's about to turn yellow when it goes down to 1, 0, and you're coming and you have a choice to make, right? Am I going to go ahead and slow down for this light I know is going to turn yellow, or am I going to go through it? And then the light turns yellow and you're still approaching it. And then you do this quick scan. It's almost unconscious. You look to both sides. Maybe you're looking to see what the traffic's like on both sides. You're looking to see if somebody's making a left turn out in front of you. Maybe they're trying to turn left before they get that red light. And you're calculating all these things. Maybe you're scanning. Are there any police officers on patrol right here? I'm late for work. All these things are going through your head. And at the last minute, right when that light is just about to turn red, and you know it is, and you're not in the intersection yet, you hit the gas. That is forming an intent to run that red light. At the very last second, you can form that intent. And so you can meet premeditation under first-degree murder in that split-second decision if you can prove it. I don't see that happening in Tennessee. I think the DA's charged the right thing. I do feel for them as far as the law on second-degree murder out there with this element of knowingly, which is really the only dispute in the trial. I could definitely see 12 jurors they'd go back in the jury deliberation room for 2 seconds and they would agree on reckless homicide. That they were aware of the risk of death and consciously disregarded it. Man, that's an easy one. But that they were reasonably certain that they were causing his death, man, I could see some jurors going sideways on that. But this case has jury appeal, which is, as a prosecutor, what you want to do is take a case in with jury appeal. As a defense attorney, you don't want it to have that. So this jury is going to want justice for Tyre Nichols. So maybe that gives them that gets the second degree murder conviction done. But it's going to be a tough one. And look, we're going to go to commercial one more time, and when we come back, we got a few more things to talk about with this case. And this is just the whole country's captivated here, and this investigation's ongoing, and that's what we're going to do. Call in if you have anything you want to talk about. 221-7283, 702-221-7283. This is Pushing the Limits. I'm Thomas Moskal, Las Vegas criminal lawyer, former prosecutor, and I'm sitting in for Brian Shapiro. We'll see you in a few.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Shapiro from Pushing the Limits. I want to tell you guys about Sahara West. West we also offer general located on Sahara Avenue. Their number is 702-248-0554. The best part, they accept most major insurances and affordable cash pay prices. Office visits starting at just $95. And I'm also a client. Please give them a call, 702-248-0554.
Hey, everybody, are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. Located at 467 East Silverado Ranch, Boulevard, just off the road, half a mile east of South Bay Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super hero, that is, because why be a sub? You can be a hero. Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
A great start! Your entertainment destination, the South Point, invites you to experience the ultimate great time under one roof. Dancing, a live show, a movie, delicious dining, and one of South Point's 11 restaurants. So much to see, so much to do. You won't know where to start first. This week, make it a South Point week and discover for yourself why the South Point is your entertainment destination for a great time.
The Klondike Casino is a friendly local spot that features their signature restaurant, the Klondike Grill, serving up fresh food fast. It's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner just off the 95 freeway on Sunset Road in Henderson. You will find the Klondike Casino featuring all your favorite games from the strip in the comfort of a neighborhood casino. You can place a bet at their full-service sportsbook or start your day with a breakfast plate that comes with your choice of potato and toast. Check us out for lunch or dinner and try one of our many sandwiches, like the popular beer-battered fish sandwich or the Philly cheesesteak. Check out the full menu at KlondikeSunset.com.
Welcome to Hash House A Go-Go, where we've been serving farm food and crafted cocktails for over 2 decades. Visit us for the full Hash House experience at any of our 5 Las Vegas locations. Hash House A Go-Go is where old school meets new and gets twisted. We bring people together over good food and fun. Come in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and come hungry because our portions are huge. Visit us online to see our entire menu at hashhouseagogo.com. Hash House A Go-Go. It's a Midwest thing, and there's nothing else like it.
The hits, the highlight reel performances. Get into the unforgettable action with up-close access at college football's premier showcase event at the 2023 East-West Shrine Bowl, Thursday, February 2nd at Allegiant Stadium. Watch top players from across the country ahead of NFL Draft Day, benefiting amazing care at Shriners Children's. Purchase your tickets today at shrinebowl.com. It's the 98th East-West Shrine Bowl. Today's All-Stars, tomorrow's Legends.
The fastest weekend of the year is headed back to Las Vegas Motor Speedway March 3rd through 5th for the Pennzoil 400. As NASCAR swings west, this race is right here in our own backyard. High speeds, trading paint, and all-out racing action make it a great choice for exhilarating entertainment.
Bowman, the showman, has won at Las Vegas in overtime.
Las Vegas Motor Speedway treats locals right. Free parking all the time. What happens in Vegas, the locals attend.
All right, we are back on air for the limit earlier. More Chief Prosecutor here in Las Vegas, and we are talking about Tyre Nichols. So, we've talked about what the body cam showed and where you can go see that, and we talked about some of the legalities behind the second-degree murder charge, some of the problems in the case. But what I really want to get into right now is there's a huge rumor out there that is circulated around the internet. It's been traced back to a couple of sources who have basically admitted that they're just speculating on this. And the rumor is that Tyre Nichols was romantically involved, having a sexual relationship with the ex-wife or ex-girlfriend, or people even said current girlfriend of one of these Scorpion Unit police officers, and that is why they specifically targeted him, and that they specifically were intending to beat him down, to send a message. There's even a rumor out there that one of the officers took a picture of Tyre Nichols' face after the beating when he sat up on that car, and then picture message the ex, showing the damage they just did to Tyre. I'm going to tell you this. Newsweek, these other news agencies, they caught on to this. They're trying to substantiate this. There is literally no There's no corroboration of this at all. And where this originally appeared from was a couple of tweets that kind of went viral and basically saying that that's what they knew. So if we're just going to speculate on this, let's speculate on it like this. I talked to a guy on a live show Saturday night who's from Memphis who has been targeted by the Scorpion Unit before. And he says the word on the street about this in Memphis locally is that there's no truth to it. They have talked to people there in the Memphis community, Newsweek and other news organizations. Everything they're getting from everybody who is actually on the ground there in Memphis is saying they don't believe there's any truth, that there was any connection between Tyre Nichols and these officers. That being said, I can see why this thing has taken off and caught fire. But even if this was true, even if they did target him, this doesn't mean it was first degree murder. Because, yeah, look, you can go and intend to beat somebody down, but that doesn't mean you're intending to cause their death. So even if it ends up being premeditated, the only way you're going to be able to find out if this is really true, and I'm sure this is what they've done, is they're dumping these officers' cell phones right now. Forensic dump. They're getting in, and come on, I wouldn't want my cell phone downloaded, but your whole life is on there. There's no secret that you can keep on your cell phone that they're not going to be able to get in forensic dump if they can crack into it. And if you have an iPhone, they're not going to crack into it. But if you have a Droid, they're going to get into it. And if it shows some text messages or even that picture message or something like that, then we'll see. They're going to do an internal investigation within the police department. I'm sure people in the police department would have information on that. But what this appears to be is just an internet rumor that is not able to be substantiated. But it sounds sexy, though, doesn't it? That these guys actually targeted him for that reason. And some people even go even further to go, well, Tyre Nichols brought this upon himself because he was messing with a ex-girlfriend of one of these cops. Well, even if that was true, come on. Let's stop with that. We have a couple callers. I want to get to them. First, we have John on. Let's go to John. Are you there, John?
Thomas, how you doing, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good, man.
Hey, Thomas. As a retired lawyer, Mark, are you listening? GM Mark?
Yeah, Mark's here.
You will not find a better legal analysis of this matter anywhere in America except from Thomas Moskal at KSHP. Mark, you're sitting on a gold mine, man. You got Brian Shapiro, you got Thomas, you got Doug Basham, you got Chris. You're sitting on a freaking gold mine, man. Put it together, syndicate it, get it all over America.
Well, I appreciate that. What do you think?
The reason I called, Tom,
yeah.
The reason I called is you've done a tremendous legal analysis, and I feel we would be remiss if we didn't ask you to do a political analysis and tie it back to Clark County, because there were times over the past decade, where, look, let's face it, Las Vegas has had tons of these incidences, and I would say we're extremely lucky that none of them really became national like this one. In fact, the feds had to come in once and teach the cops to maybe implement de-escalation, if memory serves. I would, if you could speak to the pressure that is applied to the district attorney politically not to bring charges against these bad cops. And I know you can't really talk to your personal experiences, just in general terms.
Sure.
How big that pressure is and how influential that pressure is.
Sure. So here in Clark County, the FBI has come in and done some training in Nevada and in Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is considered by the feds to be the gold standard in the country as far as our transparency right after an officer-involved shooting or anything like this. The swiftness with which the DA's office acts to investigate. We don't leave it to the police here or a state investigation unit to come in and do their own internal investigation. The DA's office gets everything on the shooting right away and does their own analysis. And what they're doing an analysis on is first, we're going to have a public hearing where a defense attorney is going to be present also as an ombudsman, and it's a public hearing for everybody to get involved to see if this was a righteous act by the cops or not. And this is the biggest step that these communities can take towards making sure that you're not having riots out there on the streets, is that your community knows whenever something like this happens, there is going to be a very quick public hearing and disclosure of everything relevant to what's going on. Politically, not charging officers, I actually think it's the opposite way. I think that you have right now in this climate, the DA is a political position, and I think DAs across the country and officers need to be careful. I think DAs are looking to be able to charge officers in cases like this and not show favoritism towards officers by not charging them, because there's just been too much political blowback from cutting any kind of breaks to law enforcement whenever there's a shooting or a killing out there on the streets. When officers are not charged, we can go all the way back to Rodney King. If you're bringing lesser charges, for instance, out there in Tennessee, I'm telling you right now, the second-degree murder charges are going to be troublesome for the prosecutors given the law in Tennessee, but at least they charged it. And had they not charged it and they said, oh, we're just going to charge this as reckless homicide, the community would have gone crazy. So I think the political pressure on DAs is actually to file charges against officers. And that's what I would advise any officer, if I was representing them, I'd go, look, as soon as you have to raise your firearm and use it out there, you are now a suspect for criminal charges by your own internal investigation unit and by the DA's office. And so you need to protect yourself, because right now it is kind of leaning the other way. Thankfully, in Vegas, pretty much every officer involved shooting, I say pretty much because I know Brian Shapiro has a big problem with what happened at the federal courthouse, that guy that was carrying the rifle. And there hasn't been a real public disclosure of what happened in that case, despite multiple calls for it. And it's kind of like fallen by the wayside. And so he feels real strongly about that one. But other than that one, it's really hard to point to other incidents here in Las Vegas that were considered not righteous shoots. Everything that I ever saw in my career, when I watched body cam back of our Las Vegas officers in Clark County, what they were doing, I always said, dang, you waited too long to do what you did. You really did, because this guy was completely out of line. He was putting everybody at risk. So that's the political side of it. I don't think DAs are cutting breaks to cops right now. I'm not saying that's not happening in places, but the interesting question here, and I wasn't able to pose it. Maybe we have time for another call. But the question is, that a lot of people are asking, what if these officers were white? Would these charges be coming down the same way? And some people go, well, that's just not even part of the conversation. You can either say, look, it's the blue wall, it's the blue uniform that's racist, or they'll just say, it's just not part. It doesn't even make sense to have that conversation because these officers are not white. But there's a lot of people in the community in America who think maybe these charges got filed fast because the officers in this case were black. It's an interesting question to think about. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. There's another part of that conversation. What if these officers are the same officers, black officers, but Tyre Nichols was white? What would be going on then? What would the bail be set at in that case? Because, all these officers got set a $250,000 or no, $50,000 bail, I believe. Maybe $250,000. Either way, it doesn't even matter. They all bailed out. All these guys are out of custody right now. Would it be that way if Tyre Nichols was white? And so there's a racial component to that. And so I think I don't want Tyre Nichols' death to be in vain. I think if there's going to be changes here, this isn't the perfect, what we call a test case. If I'm just going to be completely like an emotional, like unemotional legal monster here and just look at it from the law's perspective and just say, look, the perfect case would have been if these officers were white, right? Then we could really like kind of see what's going on, but it's not. But at least in this case, as opposed to George Floyd, Tyre Nichols, from all accounts, this was a good kid. I call him a kid because he was 29. He had a lot of life ahead of him. He was a good kid with no criminal history, no negative interactions with law enforcement whatsoever. And this is the way the media portrays it. Like, oh, he's a skateboarder, the black skateboarder. Almost, I don't like them painting him that way, but the way this has been painted, this is not like the best test case to really see what's going on in this country as far as how we're charging officers and what we're going to do in certain situations. But the case is what it is. and they're moving about it the right way. So those are two interesting questions along racial lines. And I'd like to get to another caller that we have. I believe we have Fernando on the line. Fernando, are you there, buddy?
Yes, I am. Good show. Good job, Thomas. In the beginning of this incident in Tennessee, does the special Scorpion Challenger cars have dash cam on them?
It doesn't appear to be that way. I mean, that's
okay.
I mean, so here's the question, and this is what I was getting to before I took your call. Is
in the beginning
is look, we've only seen 3 pieces of body cam. Is there more body cam available? It seems like there is going to be more body cam available because the Tennessee authorities have come out and said they're still conducting their investigation, but there will be more body cam administratively released or more video. So that tells me there's more body cam. But what I don't think there is going to be is dash cam from the Scorpion unit. I don't think there's going to be body cam from anybody on the Scorpion unit other than what we've seen. And that comes down to 2 things. Either one, with the dash cam, they're probably not even equipped on the cars because those would run continuously. But with the body cam, either these officers are not equipped with it or they didn't turn it on. And so right now there's a movement in this country in some jurisdictions where body cam runs continuously. As long as the officer's on duty, his body cam is running and it's recording. Not every jurisdiction, like here in Las Vegas and Clark County, we don't have that yet. So officers do turn it off and on. So it's always recording video, but it's always deleting the video as it's recording it until you hit that button. And when you hit that button, it captures the last 30 seconds before you hit that button with no audio, and then it continues on. So my question that I really want to see the answer to, and this will be coming in the next few weeks, is were these Scorpion unit officers equipped with body cam and then they just didn't press their buttons? Because I'm telling you, we don't have any body cam of it, and I know this. I know this how, because the Memphis police chief said that she could not corroborate the reason for the traffic stop. But she also came out and said we cannot prove that the reason for the traffic stop was not valid, which means there's no body cam existing because it would prove one way or the other. That's what my takeaway from her statement on that is. So no dash cam, no body cam from these Scorpion unit guys other than what we've seen.
A lot of these special unit police units, they go looking for trouble instead of preventing trouble. And they're just guys who want, they have the power of the badge to do whatever they want. In some cases, not all, in some cases. And but anyway, have a good day, partner. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. So yeah, units like the Scorpion unit, they look, this is coming straight from people who worked within the Memphis Police Department. They're saying, look, the Scorpion unit, their belief was you attack the criminals. You take the fight to the criminals. You don't wait and play defense. And I'm not saying that's not a valid approach to law enforcement, but Jesus, you got to have real good oversight over a unit that's believing like that. And you definitely cannot let them think they have carte blanche out there to roll without body cams, to throw ski masks on and start terrorizing people out there in the community. I mean, of course, if you have prolific criminals, violent criminals out there, we don't want to just sit back and wait for them to do something. We don't. We want to be proactive. But yeah, this is a very aggressive Scorpion unit. And what I hope comes out of this, since we're talking about body cam and dash cam, the movement is towards continuous body cam recording. And if anything, departments are resisting this, and they're resisting it for 2 reasons. Number one is money. Look, having complete storage of stuff, every officer's body cam constantly being stored, it costs more money. That's the big fiscal argument behind not having body cam running continuously on every single officer and just have them tap it when they're ready to go. The problem with that is sometimes they don't tap it, and they tap it late when they're already into an interaction. I saw it as a prosecutor. I see it as a defense attorney, and it's not even anything nefarious on their part. But when you don't tap it and you tap it late, the defense attorneys always have an argument. And I make that argument now that how come you didn't tap it? The body cam, believe it or not, it creates great evidence of guilt in cases for your investigation to have your body cam on. The second reason why departments really resist it is, and you just think about this. When I was a prosecutor, of course, being in that line of work, we see a lot of serious things, and we're involved in serious things all day long. And normal people would think if we were sitting around joking around about some of the things that we were working on, it would turn their stomach. But you get jaded, and you get a jaded sense of humor. And so I can understand officers not wanting their entire day at work recorded to where they can't even have a colloquial conversation with each other off the record, that everything's always on the record. And just to have the ability to turn it off and on if they're going to have something that's completely unrelated to a case, just a personal conversation with somebody, to not have that recorded. But the movement is towards continuous recording. And I think the Tyre Nichols situation, if there's anything that can come out good from this case, I would love to see that this case is like the poster child for, let's make sure the body cam, especially in big areas like Memphis. I can understand if you're in a city of, 100 people or 1,000 people or 3,000 people or even 100,000 people. I mean, last time I looked up Memphis recently, the last week, I think it's 1.6 million. I mean, it's a big city. That officers in that jurisdiction should be all equipped with a body cam, and that the movement should be more towards continuous body cam. Because the physical argument kind of goes out the window. It's not like you have to save this body cam forever. Look, let's take the Tyre Nichols situation. If the body cam on every officer was recording continuously, then we know within a week, 2 weeks, a month at the most, we can start deleting stuff that is not marked for preservation. Like, okay, this cop was on shift for 10 hours, and out of that 10 hours, 3 hours of it was interacting and with suspects and actually on calls where they were doing arrests and traffic stops. And we need to save those 3 hours, and we can delete the other 7. And we make that call a month later. In that situation, you're saving capacity, you're saving money that way. And we're making sure that we have cameras on everything. And that's not only just to make sure the officers are behaving right. It's not. When I was a prosecutor, man, sometimes these officers come to court for a hearing on a matter 3 years after the fact. They can't remember it. Thank God we have body cam and dash cam to play. So it's whatever happened that day, we're not relying on a guy's fallible memory or his lack of memory. I had to dismiss a case against somebody one time because the cop got on the stand and he just tells me point blank, he's saying, I have no recollection of this event at all. And why does that happen? I mean, think about whatever you do for a living out there, whatever it is. Let's say you're a waiter at a restaurant. You wait in tables for 10 years. You're not going to recall some dinner from 3 years ago unless something crazy happened at that dinner. You're literally serving 25, 30 dinners a night. That's what these officers go through with traffic stops, with arrests, with these kinds of things. Their memory fails them. And so continuous body cam doesn't just serve a purpose of annoying officers or recording everything they're doing to be a watchdog on cops. It's helping us prove cases against criminals that need to be proven in court. People always say, don't plea this out. Stop giving plea deals. Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest reasons for plea deals is body cam footage either not being preserved, no body cam footage existing, and an officer just not being able to remember. So I hope that is something that really gets pushed out of this case, but that's going to come out in the coming weeks when we see what body cam was actually preserved. And what my thought on it is this: we have officers who arrived on the scene after the beating, who were on that scene, and several of them probably had their body cams on. And so we are going to start seeing that after the DA's office out there completes its investigation and figures out exactly what charges they're going to file, who they're filing them on, and what they're going to do with this case. The reason why they always have there's always a good reason not to release body cam the way they did it. The good reason to release it is to be transparent with the public, because we want the community to have trust in law enforcement, and we want the community not to riot over something like this. So let's be transparent. Let's not make them wait 3 years until after the criminal matter is done to let it out. Okay. We've seen some of that action like down in Uvalde, Texas. They don't want to release anything, right? And so we're all skeptical. The reason for not releasing it, though, is, look, you have an open criminal matter. You're releasing this body cam out into the public. Well, you're tainting the jury pool for these officers for their criminal trial because everybody's watching it. And how are we going to be able to pick a fair and impartial jury and find people who are not privy to the facts of this case when it comes around for trial? The more they release, the more reports are released, the more evidence is released out for public consumption before we ever have these guys in trial, the more the jury pool gets tainted. And so that's the reason for not releasing it, why we were applauding the police chief for go ahead and letting this stuff out. So thanks for joining. I appreciate the calls in. John, Fernando, appreciate it as usual. We're going to keep our eyes on this case. This is just the beginning. And yeah, join us next week. Brian will be back on Monday, hopefully. And I'm Thomas Moskal, Las Vegas criminal lawyer, LasVegasCriminalLawyer.com, 848-5555. And I'm a former chief prosecutor here in Vegas. And this is all about the Tyre Nichols case. If you're just joining in, you can catch the playback on YouTube, on PCL Vegas YouTube page. It'll be up there. Until next time, peace out.